To start a discussion of the Gilded Age in Austin. Now, what you have to realize is that Gilded Age means different things to different people in different times and places. And it began with, let's see if I can remember the right button. Yes! Mark Twain wrote this book. It's not.
There. Yeah, I think you just moved away from it.
Oh, okay. It's one of those. All right. No, that's right. Yeah, 1873. He actually co-authored this thing with William Dean Howells, Charles Dudley Warner, who had almost an equal reputation to Twain. And it's kind of it's a novel. It's sort of a sarcastic look at grasping and greed, and all that stuff. Now, a lot of historians. It wasn't called the Gilded Age at that time. I mean, he made up the term. It began to be called that whole era, which in the North they would date from post-Civil War to, hello?
So we can see you better.
Okay, oh yeah, that'll make it easier to see. Thank you.
But he has to read his notes.
Oh, I'm fine. If I forget it, I'll just make something up. Really? Okay. So in the North, this is sort of from the end of the Civil War up past the Spanish-American War. It was an era in which, of unrestrained capitalism, people learned how to make great fortunes, either by exploiting immigrant labor. This is the heyday of child labor. It began to see this immense concentration of wealth in the very upper few percent. Not that we've seen that before. But in the South, it wasn't like that, because the South was still climbing out of the Civil War and some poor decisions that they made. So we were going through Reconstruction, and now what we wound up with, it got to be where people were successful. I mean, George Littlefield here, he started off actually in cattle. Now, you always see him as the plump, portly, bearded old guy. This is how he started off. He was nearly killed in the Civil War. And he really started with nothing. He tried to be a farmer. That didn't work, thanks to floods and insects. And he thought, well, maybe cattle. It's Texas. And so he took a herd up the Chisholm Trail, got him to Kansas, and made $3,600. And probably that got him started in other business. And he became the Littlefield that we all know. Now, let's see if this works. Okay, that's a nice house. And he didn't, it's on the UT campus. And he did not mind telling people that every one of those bricks came from Belgium, cost 50 cents. Okay, but that's Gilded Age in Texas. Up north, that's the Gilded Age. Okay? Totally different scale. To the Vanderbilts and, the Rockefellers and the Carnegies, we were small potatoes. Right? That's just the way that was. Now, I'm going to have to get drier paper so that I don't have to do this. Also, people in Texas, we weren't just climbing out of the Civil War. We lost a lot of people, we lost a lot of money, but we weren't as devastated as the Deep South because we were never invaded, which is sort of the point of pride with some of this. But there were still people, a lot of people in Texas who had lived the entire frontier experience from the Mexican province and Stephen F. Austin's colony, all the way through colonial days, the Republic, antebellum statehood. They were still here, and they had a much different look at society than people like us. Thinking for the moment, it was Susanna Hennig. Now, when they opened her house, it was a museum over on 5th Street, I was the curator there for a while. You know that story, there was a barbecue joint there. They were going to tear it down, build a hotel, and they found this old house. It was like part of the kitchen and part of the storeroom and all that. So you do your research, and son of a gun, that's where Susanna Dickinson lived. And so they managed to find some of her stuff. That woman really exemplified the struggle that women had. She's 15 when she marries Alan, right, in Tennessee. He's killed at the Alamo. She's left with a small daughter. Santa Ana gives her the $2, says, you know, go tell Houston, better fly, right? Well, she needed a protector, so she married a guy named Williams, beat her, he beat the baby, so she divorced him. It was one of the very first divorces in the Republic of Texas.
Good for her.
She married another guy, he drank himself to death in about 6 or 8 years. And she married number 4, whose name was Bellows. He divorced her for turning tricks in the barn.
What does that mean?
Now, oddly to me, I looked at her divorce petition, and there are affidavits attached to her divorce petition of eyewitnesses who said that they watched her through chinks in the barn. Which raises a few questions, like, didn't they have chores? I mean, I guess when there's no peep shows, you just take what you can get. So she didn't care that she got divorced. She had already moved up to Lockhart, running a boarding house. And it was at this boarding house she married Joseph Handig, who was he was German, but you know Germany was a lot more back then. He was actually Silesian, but we call him German. And actually, what got him was she was quite famous for her cooking, and she nailed him with her bacon and cabbage. She did something she could do with bacon and cabbage that, boy, all over him. Well, he came to Austin, and being a German, by the way, maybe sometime in the future, I've been working on a book about the Texas Germans for 30 years. I would love to share some stories about that. Well, he had a furniture store, and because this happened a lot. Because he had a furniture store, he was around lumber, which means he built coffins, so he might as well be an undertaker too. Guys, you get him in the ground before anything can go terribly wrong, you know. Oh, by the way, as we began to pull away from the Civil War, now she made it into the 1880s, and what did she do? She had money. She had not only they had the house on Fifth Street, they also had a spacious farm out at about from 32nd Street to Harris Avenue, from Duval over to the creek. And that was her domain. And she turned herself to good works. She would provide affidavits to revolutionary survivors who were trying to get a land grant. Oh yeah, I remember your husband. I saw him at the Alamo. He was, you know, on the east wall of the church. You know, she was a good gal. In fact, Rufus Burleson had baptized her once in her wilder days, and he, you know, she was quite sincere about it. She just wasn't so big on self-control. By the way, as Austin got more into comfort with wealth, one sign of your class was the table you set. What kind of food did you serve to people? Now, some of you may be familiar with this, but my buddy Mike put this together. This is a reproduction of Austin's first cookbook, put together by the ladies of the Central Presbyterian Church. And it's actually reproductions of the pages, so it's not like reimagining anything. And one recipe struck me particularly, the mock turtle soup. Lay 1 large calf's head, well cleaned and washed, and 4 pig's feet in the bottom of a large pot. Cover with a gallon of water, boil 3 hours or until flesh will slip off the bones. Take out the head, leaving the feet to boil steadily while you cut the meat from the head. Select with care enough of the fatty portions of the top of the head and cheeks to fill a teacup. Remove the brains to a saucer. This makes you glad they hired the cook. I would not get very far with this. Now, I understand that the Austin History Center has been moving from the old building into the Falk building. Is that true? I don't know what they're...
They haven't started moving yet, but they keep saying they're going to.
Okay, because I came up here with about 50 more boxes of my papers to give them, and they've already got a bunch of my papers. And I only got 700 square feet in my apartment. So I'm waiting on them to say I can bring this. Anyway, they will probably sell these over the counter like they used to. But this book is very illuminating. And of course, the social arbiter even then was the governor's mansion. This shows it about 1907. When President McKinley came to visit in 1901, the Sayerses gave him a big dinner party, and you realize a large part of the interior decorating back then was greenery, garlands and vines, and just everywhere. And my dear buddy, the late Jane Korotkin, many years ran the Friends of the Governor's Mansion. We curated an exhibit once about the first families. We got some of those Sayers and stuff. Interesting. Even in that class, some things never changed. When they left the Governor's Mansion and Governor Lanham moved in, the Sayers' dog wouldn't leave. They tried to take him, he came back. They tried to take him, he came back. And so the Lanham just said, to hell with it, we'll keep him. Yeah. All right. Whenever I've got like 30 minutes to give a talk, I feel a little bit like Rabbi Hillel, the elder. When you read the Bible about Jesus when he's a kid, he disappears for a while, nobody knows where he is, and they find him with the rabbis. He was probably with Hillel, because his student, he was famous, he would never give you a sentence when he could keep you half the day. He was windy. And so his student said, Rabbi, please explain the law of the prophets, the law and the prophets standing on one foot. And he stood on one foot and he said, that which is hateful to yourself, don't do to others. And the rest is details, go home and study. Which is a backhanded golden rule, so you wonder who else was in the audience listening to that. Because this is half a generation before Jesus' ministry. Anyway, a lot of people were not nearly so grand. But there were always people on the make who were really out there trying. And one of my favorites, when you drive south on Congress Avenue, and you pass the freeway at Ben White, the next light is Rodham Street. You know who William Rodham was? Oh, good. I get to tell you. There he is, William Rodham. He was just a humble German immigrant. He was a gardener, mowing the yards for people, planting stuff. And one day he was working for some people, and he needed some weed killer. They were out of weed killer, so he goes into the carriage house, finds some readily available household chemicals, made him up some weed killer, and boy did it work. Those weeds died so dead. He thought, well, maybe I've got something. And he thought, I don't feel so well myself.
Oh, no.
He got better. Thus was born Rodham's Miracle Microbe Killer. Now, it cost him a nickel to make a gallon of it. It's a little hydrochloric acid, a little sulfuric acid, some food coloring, enough red wine to give it some happiness, and mostly water. By the time he was done, he owned 17 bottling plants around the United States. These jugs of his, they're on the collector market for like $160, $70 now. So he sold out in Austin, and he moved to a brownstone on Fifth Avenue in New York, where he died of liver failure. Okay, I'm not sure what's next. Yes, all right. Now, women, when they were ambitious and wanted to do for themselves, they had fewer options. I mean, you could be a teacher, you could be a domestic, a nurse, maybe. Well, this story begins, oddly enough, with one of my heroes, Chief Justice Hemphill. Chief Justice under both the Republic and the antebellum state. He's called John Marshall of Texas. he came to Texas with a library of Spanish law, because Texas belonged to Mexico. So when we became independent, everybody else is saying, oh, we need to get rid of all that damn Mexican law. We're Americans now. Well, he's the Chief Justice, and he realized that if we did that, we would throw centuries of land grants into chaos, many other bad effects that nobody was foreseeing. And he also knew that in Spanish law, thanks to Queen Isabella, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, that Isabella, she was determined that women in her kingdom would be at the same legal station as men. Monte tanto, tanto monte, equal power, equal estate. She and Ferdinand both had to sign decrees. Well, that came to New Spain, came to Mexico, and came into Texas when it was a Mexican province. Because he figured out women in Texas, as a republic, could own property, they could go into business, they could inherit things. They were virtually the legal equals of men, which was unthinkable to women in the United States. In fact, there were women as heads of households who signed up in Stephen F. Austin's colonies to come here because they knew they'd be a hell of a lot more powerful. Well, he was from South Carolina. He was estranged from that family. And so he bought a servant named Sabina for $500. Now, this gets very delicate because in modern sensibility, a relationship between a master and a slave was rape, period, end of discussion, because she did not have the legal competence to refuse if she wanted to. Which puts you in a very odd position if, as people are today, they were back then, in a mixed race relationship. You couldn't marry her because it wasn't legal. You couldn't free her because the slave catcher would come take her and sell her in Mississippi or somewhere. So you just lived together. Well, Hemphill and Sabina had two daughters, Theodora and Henrietta, whom he put into Wilberforce University in Ohio, where they would get an outstanding education and be free. Right? Well, he was determined. Henrietta died. So when the Texas Senate replaced Sam Houston as senator because he was so against slavery, he wasn't against slavery, he just accepted that as the social norm. He stopped in Ohio and told the president of Wilberforce, when I die, Theodora gets everything. Because he hated his family in South Carolina. Well, he didn't expect to keel over and die right then. The Chief Justice of the Texas Supreme Court died intestate. He had no will. So here came the South Carolina family, took everything, and Theodora sued them. And not unusually for the courts in Texas, she won. People don't realize that both as Republican and antebellum state, there were slaves in Texas who sued for their freedom and won. It was unthinkable in the rest of the South, but Texas had always been its own thing. So the South Carolina family had to settle $6,000 on her, which was well over $250,000 today. So she came in triumph back to Austin, where she became one of the city's most powerful and successful madams. Now, we don't have a picture of, she owned not one but two houses of pleasure. No picture survived. I like to think that Georgia Fraser's house, which was, I think, at like 3rd and Colorado, or 2nd Colorado, because it was along 2nd Street. Anyway, women had to do what they had to do. Now, I am not nearly as judgmental about that as some people like to be. But she was very successful, lived a nice long life. I don't know that she ever publicized her parentage, but I could go all day just about John Hemphill. He was an amazing, amazing character. But I'll kind of get even because we're going to end this by talking about the turn of the century Supreme Court. Now, these do-gooders that always kept everybody kind of mindful that, okay, you're getting rich, but you've got the Bible. You got to be good to poor people. You got to clothe the naked. You got to feed the hungry. Well, I want you to say hello to Richmond Kelly Smoot.
We know him.
You did. All right. Tell me, how do you know him?
It was me. Jane Smoot was one of the original founders of this organization. That
Ah.
is her father.
Yes. Grandfather. No. Yes.
Yeah, he was a preacher, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. He was from Bowling Green, Kentucky. He comes to Austin at the invitation of the Central Presbyterian Church, goes in to give them a sermon, and finds out that this is one of those churches where the more you gave the church, the closer to the front you got to sit. He gave them such a blistering that they either had to crawl away or, they hired him. Now, his house was a little 4-room Victorian thing on West Pecan Street. And so he was a founder of the seminary. The library is named for him. He and his wife had 2 children. One of them co-founded the Austin American, founded the newspaper. And the other one was the Supreme Court reporter for 66 years. He remains the longest serving public servant in the history of Texas. Now, more family members piled in on them, and they would send money ahead, and they added onto the house, put another room on, put another room over here. Finally, his niece, great niece, moved in, and this is on into the 20th century. Her name was Amelia Williams, the editor of Sam Houston's papers. She was studying for her PhD at UT. Her stuff is still there. That house is now 14 rooms. Here it is. I'm sure you've seen it.
It's Flower Mound.
Flower Hill. Yeah. And back when Robin Soto was the curator, she's not there anymore. She's the one who made it happen. I've given tours. I often give tours. I know good docenting, and she was the best. That house, Jane Smoot, when she died, she retired. She lived there many years, almost as a recluse, cataloging everything in the house. She'd write a ticket for what it was, where it came from, what it's associated with, 4,000 items. And when she gave it to the city, and after she passed, they shut it up, and it just sat there aging like King Tut's tomb. Well, they finally got it going again and realized, I'm going to start bawling. This is one of the most moving things I've ever seen. This Gilded Age family, their house is now a museum, not a museum of stuff. They got wonderful stuff. But it's a museum of how to live your life giving back to the community. They call it an urban homestead. They're starting his old gardens again as gardening classes for school kids. They bring in school kids, give the produce to the homeless. It's just a whole amazing operation. Somebody in that family, they had a bicycle and they had chickens, so he would bicycle up and down Pecan Street selling eggs. They had cows. Why did a family like this need butter and egg money? Because they weren't rich. There's just a dozen of them living there, all contributing. Like I don't know, early Christians on Crete or something. They had a mail order business of fancy Cornish game hens. They made some money with that. On into the 20th century, when the Depression came, they took in homeless artists. They said, okay, no rent, you can stay here. All you got to do is leave a painting. And that house is full of their paintings. It's open for tours by appointment. If you haven't been there, you are in for the treat of your life. It's just an amazing place. Now, is that all I wanted to say about the Smoots? Oh, by the way, when I was there for my tour, people were coming up and knocking on the door because they heard about it. And 3 or 4 of them would say, she was my English teacher. I love Miss Smoot. Including, I had one of my best buddies, Reverend Bill Young. We had lunch last week, and I told him I was going to give this talk. And he said, she was my English teacher. She was great.
Where did she teach? Huh? Where did she teach?
Travis.
Thank you.
Yeah. Actually, she taught it there for a long time, and then a short time, then maybe Austin, or something, yeah. Okay, now, of course, they weren't the only, they were probably the prime example to hold up to the rest of the city of this is how you handle wealth and opportunity. There were people on the make who had grander visions, including Monroe Scheidt, who plotted out Hyde Park in 1891 on what had been the old fairgrounds. Had a lake, had a horse racing course. By the way, 39th Street, when you go east from Speedway, that kind of makes a curve before it keeps going. That's the end of the race course. And it's right across the street from the Baptist church, which I find kind of amusing. The ghost of all those horse races. Now, the thing was, he marketed this. It's 3 miles north of town. He markets it to rich people. And, of course, there are a few grand houses there. Not the breakers, but for Austin, big houses. But there weren't that many takers. He got hung with it was 138 acres, mostly that he got hung with. So he thought, well, I better think about this. Maybe there's not that many rich people here. So he recast it as a subdivision for working people, which is why it's full of bungalows. That was his house. It's 39th and Avenue, Effigy. It's nice, but it's not lavish. It's frame, it's not brick. When I was just out of law school, it was for sale. And if I'd had any money at all, I would have. Of course, you can't really expect everybody to have the same level of historical interest, that we do. In fact, I was doing research at the State Archives for some project or other, and I was looking up the records, Republic of Texas Army records, of William P. Zuber, Z-U-B-E-R. What is the chance that the last survivor of the Battle of San Jacinto, his name would be Zuber? But the return address on his letters was like 4308 Avenue, F. 4308 Avenue F. So I went by there, and there was this sad little 3-bedroom, 1-bath house. Needed a lot of love, but it was for sale for 2 years. And just sat there. And I should have begged, I should have borrowed, because I was the only person who knew what the story was. Except a friend of mine who worked for Texas Pro Tax. He was showing it to somebody who was interested in buying it. And he told him the history that I told him. Oh, that's fascinating. I really want this. I want to fix this up and turn it. I can get my historic designation and get the tax break and all that. And so she bought it, and the bulldozer showed up the next day. Yeah, there's a special warming platter in hell for her. Well, now Scheidt did manage to find a few local eccentrics, and one of my favorite Gilded Age eccentrics in Austin, we all know her, Elizabeth Ney. Now, I kind of like Elizabeth Ney. She had guts to live so long with Mr. Montgomery without getting married. She got married finally and wouldn't change her name. They come to Texas, and her Liendo plantation, she's got help. And she's trying to elevate them, give them an education and all that. They mock her behind her back, which hurt her feelings terribly. But when she had her house built, it wasn't all at once. She built a small one and then added on to it. It's artsy, eccentric. You got to climb a ladder to get to the studio. Who needs stairs? But there's pictures of her, and I couldn't get my hands on one in time, having a tea party for Sam Houston's Daughters of the Lights dimming because I'm out of time. No. Okay. All right, well, one more set to go. She was, above all things, an incredible artist. I mean, not just her, when you walk in the Capitol, the South Lobby, there are her life-size marbles of Sam Houston and Stephen F. Austin. Copies of those are the ones, every state gets 2 statues in the National Capitol in Washington. That's our 2. She did them for the Chicago World's Fair in 1893. But before she ever came to the United States, she had sculpted the King of Bavaria. She had sculpted the King of Prussia. She had the King of Saxony. Garibaldi in Italy. I mean, this woman was a brilliant, brilliant sculptor. But with brilliance comes a little insanity, I guess. Now, there was one other sort of break upon the rampant capitalism and inequality that you saw up north. It kind of held that back in Texas. Well, actually, I forgot this one. This is our breakers. This is our Biltmore. But we did it in a public expenditure. And I tell you what, I've never enjoyed so much giving tours as through this amazing 15,000 carloads of granite. You build a special railroad to, oh, by the way, I'll bet you don't know this. When I was a kid, everybody called it pink granite. We all call it, it's pink granite. Well, when I was working there, Governor Perry thought, that's just not a very butch name for a Texas capital. Ironic, huh? So all of a sudden, it became Sunset Rose. And we were under edict that capital is Sunset Rose. It has never been pink, and this is what you call it. Except the next year there were more meetings. Sunset Rose, that's still not very butch. And now it's Sunset Red. And since, we didn't want to get written up for saying pink, but you never saw so many eyes roll from sun up to sundown. 15,000 carloads of granite, 4 stories of 22-foot ceilings. The plaster work alone, the cornices cost $65,000. They imported the stair newels and banisters from Belgium. You notice the transoms over the doors are all etched in acid with different designs and like treasurer's office or whatever. There's 115 cases of acid etched glass that came from England, $115,000. Because we couldn't do that here. They spared no expense. So that is our biggest proclamation of the whole Gilded Age. But on the 3rd floor, and this isn't open for tours, on the 3rd floor sat these guys. Oh my goodness. They were called the Consensus Court because they almost never disagreed. On the left you have Thomas Jefferson Brown, who was a teetotaler, Baptist. He lived over maybe 12th Street and near 12th Street and West, somewhere like that. And he would take a walk every night, and they had help who would follow him with a lantern to keep him from getting run over by some, Tin Lizzie. In the middle is the Chief Justice, Reuben Reed Gaines. He had been an associate justice before being elevated to chief. Calm, deliberative, analytical, except when he was having a temper tantrum. If you said something he didn't agree with, he was known to throw inkwells. In fact, he and his wife lived in an apartment in the Driscoll, and they were having, I think it was a Thanksgiving dinner. It was a turkey dinner with him at the head, and he stood up to carve the turkey, and the servant got busy after he pulled the chair back, but he didn't put the chair back under. So when Judge Gaines sat back down, turkey, dishes, flatware, tablecloth all came down with him. And that particular waiter was last seen running down Pecan Street with Judge Gaines chasing him with the butcher knife. And over on the right is Associate Justice Frank Alvin Williams. Now, they were all great. Now, Gaines and Williams in particular were good buddies. They went fishing a lot. And I read the court porter, Alex, wrote that sometimes they would forget their fishing poles. But they never forgot the beer. And of course, Judge Brown was a teetotaler, so he didn't partake in that. Well, they all three went out fishing once, and you know how fast the norther can come on you and just dump you with icy rain. And so Gaines and Williams had a little whiskey, and poor Brown is sitting soaking wet on a rock. Won't drink. Well, maybe I'll try one. Well, in a short while, he was very jolly. Now, the thing about the Consensus Court is, look at our Supreme Court now that you yell about runaway activists, liberal judges, and so on. And I wrote a history of the state Supreme Court for the state bar. I can only find one copy. It's here. It's $30, whoever wants one. If you're a lawyer, married to a lawyer. Back then, their philosophy was an appellate court has two jobs to do. You have to interpret the law, but you also have to administer justice to the case before you. Well, we kind of forget now about that second part. But it's what they call equity jurisprudence. If you see what has to be done and there's no law, there's no precedent, you do it anyway. These are the guys who gave us the doctrine of attractive nuisance. If you have something dangerous on your property, like a swimming pool, you have to put a fence around it, or you're responsible for it. There was no law. There was no precedent. There's no case law. They just said that's the right thing to do. And that was their sense of mindfulness about how a society looks out for its own. And, oh, by the way, this will kind of put a cap on all of it. You see a motto under the middle. They still have that. When the Supreme Court expanded from 3 to 9, they saw the bench in half and added more in the middle. And then when they moved over to the new building in 1960, they put it back together. But the motto that you just see there, Sicut Patribus et Deus Nobis, which began as the motto for the city of Boston. And in Texas, they always interpreted it as he was to our fathers, so may God be to us. Well, in 1902, they hired a clerk who actually spoke Latin. And he said, no, Sicut Patribus et Deus Nobis, as our fathers did, God will do to us. Different narrative. Different narrative. And these guys were always concerned. These are the guys who upheld the idea that, okay, a woman is married to an alcoholic. You've got a saloon down the street. She can make them post a bond not to serve her husband anymore. They have such a rich history of the Gaines Court. It's just great stuff. So as you see, the Gilded Age played out differently here, and I think mostly to our credit. One of many things I love about Austin. So that's what I got. If you would like questions, I'm great at I don't know. Oh, come on. Yes, ma'am.
Did you know that Miss Luke was one of our presidents for pictures on the wall?
I did not. Show it to me afterwards.
James Perry.
Yeah,
All of her handwritten notes in the archive. Showing her thank you letters, all I hate you letters.
I heard she traveled a lot after she retired.
Well,
She also drove fast.
Oh my gosh. That's why I love doing these things. I learn more new stuff. She had a lead foot.
She was in a hurry to get things done all the time.
Wow.
A lot of us knew her personally. And there's someone who was one of her students, Ring Fitzgerald. Right here.
Yeah.
She was awesome.
So I've heard. They have a file. When she would travel, she would get people's address, and she would stay in touch with them, and there was correspondence files.
all these little notes are from the people that she communicated with.
Oh,
She had a
wow.
copy of what she said to them.
So do the people at Flower Hill know that you have another stash over here?
Yes. Was the person I told her all the stuff we had in.
Well, she probably thought it's going to take us 18 years to get through what we got.
Are there any more questions?
Yes, Green.
Just one more. One thing that you could do an entire speech on is the French legation.
Yeah.
Here in Austin. That's awesome. I was fascinated.
Yeah, in fact, I've years ago I did quite a study of Alphonse Dubois de Saligny. Yes, ma'am?
Do you think Jack the Ripper left London to perform the servant girl murders?
No. In fact, I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around the idea that Jack the Ripper was really Prince Albert Victor. Thank you. You guys have been wonderful. Now, we're going to eat, and then you're going to come see me and buy a book. Thank you.